Hello and welcome to the Purpose Pursuit podcast with me, Hannah Miller. Now, with all our episodes, we try to dig into topics that have come out of coaching conversations or come out of my life situations, and trying to give us the chance to explore what it looks like for people who are trying to live purposeful lives and understand themselves and enjoy life and live it to the full. And this episode feels quite close to home at the moment. We decided a few weeks ago that we would look at the topic of being chronically overcommitted. I talk to lots of people, whether they are CEOs or senior leaders or people in teams, doctors, nurses, teachers, all kinds of individuals. And this theme around being overcommitted comes back time and time again. And sometimes we don't have the language to put around it. Sometimes we don't understand how it's happened. Sometimes we don't know how we can possibly escape this cycle of feeling like this. And sometimes we look on at other people who seem to not be in that position and just wonder how on earth they have managed to look out in that way. And the reason I think it's feeling quite close to home at the moment is because I'm not sure I am chronically overcommitted, but the way life feels right now is that there's a definite squeeze and pull on my time in a way that means that I feel like I'm underperforming. And I'll come back to that point a bit in a moment. I want us to spend some time in this episode looking at what overcommitment actually is, as opposed to a bit of busyness. Why do we do it? I think it's really important for us to figure out why we do something so that we stop doing it. If we don't know why we do something, how can we change the patterns? We're going to look at the problems with it and then what we can do about it. So that's kind of the journey we're going to go on. And you've probably heard this example before. It comes from Greek mythology. There's a Greek mythological story about somebody called Sisyphus who does the wrong thing. I can't remember what he does wrong, but his punishment from the gods is that he has this great big boulder that he has to push up a hill, and it gets nearly to the top of the hill, only for it to fall all the way back down the hill and for him to have to do the whole thing over and over again for eternity. And I think some of us, as you're listening to that, feel a bit like that about the stuff in your life, that you've got this great big boulder of responsibilities, of different parts of your life, things that you have said yes to, things that you are responsible for, and you are pushing that boulder up a hill, and you feel like you make a bit of progress only for it to roll all the way back down to the bottom again. The to-do list fills up again and you feel overcommitted and you cannot get to the bottom of it. And in fact, statistically, about 3 out of 5 people say that they can't possibly complete everything on their to-do list. Now, I don't know who these 2 out of 5 people are, unless they are children or people who are fully retired. But I don't know that many people in my life to make up the 2 out of 5 that can complete it. I think there is this feeling of too much to do and not enough time that is actually part of modern life, of the way we live. And I don't think it shows any signs of exacerbating. And we've got to think about what we do about it without just feeling like we've got to check out and not do anything that involves responsibility or commitment and so on, because I just don't believe that's the answer. So if you're feeling a bit like you have too much going on, or that you've said yes to a lot, maybe you are in this overcommitted situation. And let's have a talk together a little bit more about what this is, as opposed to just being a bit busy. Because life, for most of us, especially I think in the middle years, life is busy. I don't think that's that's going away anytime soon. Now, we talked a bit about toxic productivity a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, and that is more about this deep need to keep being productive and not knowing how to not be productive. I want us to look at this slightly differently. Overcommitment is about taking on more than we can handle, which can lead to high levels of stress, frustration, burnout, and also actually unproductivity, not being very productive, not being very efficient. Signs that we're overcommitted include us choosing to say yes too quickly to things, when we work late regularly, when we feel really guilty about actually resting. So some of the things that you might want to watch out for to think, am I overcommitted, include this. I'm just going to give you this as a little list. Saying yes to requests without considering your capacity. avoiding prioritization and tackling whatever seems most urgent, frequently working late hours or during weekends to catch up, experiencing anxiety or resentment when asked for help or feedback, feeling worried or guilty when you have free time, and constantly second-guessing your decisions. Now, honestly, when I read that list earlier, when I was in preparation for this episode, I feel like my life feels a bit overcommitted at the moment. I feel that because of some other stuff that's going on in my personal life, which is quite large life events are happening, everything else that I have to do feels like too much. And that feeling that I'm starting to notice in myself is that I often have too many tabs open on my laptop as it is. So I'm going to use that as an example. When I've got 30 tabs open on my laptop, it's a bit what my brain feels like right now. Almost like every single type of responsibility I've got is all open in front of me and I don't even know where to start. And I can feel this growing sense of unproductivity in me because I actually don't know where to start. And so I had some time to get some stuff done on Friday and I felt like I was just lurching from one responsibility to the next. Oh, I need to phone the dentist. I've got this deep piece of editing to do. I need to do the finances. I need to do a bit of work in preparation for a strategy day. I need to email this person back. And so what I did was I ping-ponged between all of these things in my brain and ended up a bit like Sisyphus, pushing that boulder up a hill and probably not getting very far at all with it. And I hope as you're listening to me tell this story, some of you might feel seen and heard and that this is what life feels like for you at the moment. Because what then happens is we get more and more foggy and less efficient, and we don't know how to see the wood for the trees, and we don't know how to actually do a good job of the commitments that we've got. And everything just feels like it's bouncing from one thing to another. Or you might handle it a bit differently and just completely withdraw from your responsibilities. Perhaps that's what it looks like for you, that you, instead of kind of ping-ponging, you just go into almost like a state of freeze, and you don't even know where to start. And I think, there's people who are listening to this podcast, there's people that I coach, because you are purpose-driven individuals and you long to live a life that feels purposeful and you want a life that has actually everything it has to offer. I think we are more at risk of being overcommitted. I actually think when you want life to feel like it matters, overcommitment is a high likelihood. I as well as my paid work and being a mom and everything that I've got going on, I also sit on the board of 3 charities, and I'm also really involved in my church as well. And they are all extra responsibilities on top of the stuff that really matters in terms of my family, my wider family, my paid job, all of the things that come with that, being a friend and so on and so forth. And so I can see in that because I think these things all really matter, that those of us who are quite purpose-driven, which, by the way, is the best way to live, we could have a higher tendency of overcommitting because it matters and we think it matters. And so add into that the personality connection. You might be somebody who is really has strong empathy or high responsibility or a deep sense of connectedness or belief, or even you want to live in harmony with others. All of those wonderful things lean into the potential to filling gaps for other people. Filling gaps that perhaps other people could fill, or over-committing. I was just talking to somebody earlier today, and he was talking about how his wife, who's a teacher, is in early career. So she's a few years into teaching, and she's brilliant at what she does, and she cares about what she does, and she's fully all into her job, which is amazing. But she was reflecting to him that she doesn't think that she's actually said no to anything yet. Like every request that's come her way, she has just said, yeah, I can do that. Because, of course, she's keen, she cares, she's hardworking. It's also flattering to be trusted. All of those things play into it. So how do we go about saying no when we've already got loads of things going on? And how do we know when one thing is too many? How do we know whether we can just handle a bit more or whether we can't? So first of all, as you're listening to this, I hope you're diagnosing whether you are overcommitted or not. It's not about a busy season, it's about a way of life. That's really important. So Laura and I were talking in January at Christmas time when Zoe left about some of the things we knew we were going to have to, in the short run, handle because we were down a member of team. And that is short-term overcommitted, but it is not the plan for the long run. Overcommitment is when there really doesn't feel like there is going to be an out. There isn't a way for this to settle down again. And in fact, I'm in a circumstance at the moment where the wider things that my life has going on are one of the reasons I'm feeling overcommitted. And actually, it is going to settle down for me. There are a couple of major things that are going on that will settle down. And I have learnt my capacity. I know how much capacity I've got. And I think those things are all really, really important. So we're talking about a pattern of life that means that the minute that equilibrium could come, you find yourself overcommitted again. And you just don't seem to find a way out. And so actually, although I'm feeling very overwhelmed at the moment, I'm not sure I am chronically overcommitted usually. I think I've said no to a few things in this last year, which has been quite empowering for somebody that doesn't do that very easily. But back to you, I'm wondering how you feel about this and if you are feeling overcommitted, whether you have any idea why it's happening. And I think that's an important thing for us to consider. Why do we do this? We are not going to change if we don't know why we do something. It's not just a case of saying, we'll stop it. That's not how human beings work. We need to understand why we do it. And every time I coach people, every time people do the purpose pursuit, we look at what the problem is and then we figure out why we're doing it so that we can make a plan. So I've talked about some of the personality elements. The first thing you need to consider is what aspects of your personality might drive you to overcommit. So I think you could be an eternally optimistic person that always thinks things are not going to take as much time as they are. That's one of my husband's problems, is that he always thinks it'll be fine and he can fit it in. I think sometimes I can be a bit like that too. That can be a reason. There can be a deep sense of responsibility, that you feel like a real sense of responsibility to people, to causes, to situations, this sense of autonomy or needing to make sure that you are pulling your weight. I think that can be another psychological reason. I must not let people down. I think that there can be this aspect of a desire for validation. I think that I recognise that in myself. I want people to see me as competent. I want them to see me as helpful. I want them to see me. I would like to feel indispensable. Let's be honest. I remember, leaving a previous job and there is a little bit of you that kind of wants them to feel that you've gone. That sounds terrible because you actually want the thing to thrive, but I also wanted them to feel, gosh, look what Hannah carried and she's not here anymore. So being brutally honest with you, one of the reasons we overcommit is not just this kind of really deep purpose-driven sense of responsibility. It can be that we want to be validated. I think another reason we overcommit is that we just don't want to disappoint people and we worry about being rejected or failure or this fear of missing out. What if I don't say yes? Like this young woman we were talking about in early career teaching, and she says no. So what happens then if she gets overlooked every other possible future opportunity because she said no? How do we deal with that fear of missing out on opportunity or fear of letting people down or fear of being rejected by other people because we said no? And that can drive our overcommitment or being seen to be one of the most, helpful or willing people in the vicinity. I think sometimes we overcommit because we compare to other people and we want to keep up with peers who seem to be managing it all. And this is a real problem around comparison, of looking and thinking, how are they managing to do that? There are times when I listen to people, people in my life stage who are able to fit in so much, self-time or time to sit in this, do this and this and this. And to be honest, I'm sure people think of it about me. I do get messages from people saying, how do you fit it all in? And I think we need to know what our own capacity is, what our own family unit capacity is, what our support structures look like for us, what the flexibility of our work looks like, how much commitment we enjoy. There'll be people listening to this and you actually are very, very good at being committed to one or two things and being deeply focused on that. And there'll be others of you who actually are more proficient and productive when there's just that little bit more going on. But it's a bit of a self-awareness science to understand who you are in the middle of that and to not feel like I've got to do more because they are, when actually that's just not who you're designed to be. So the biggest antidote of comparison is to know yourself and know what's in your lane and for you to be doing. And I know whenever I slip into that, I have to come back to think, well, this is my life, this is my situation. I don't have much family support nearby. We have loads of brilliant people in our life, but there are certain things I can't do that other people might be able to do because of mums and dads and so on. And then there's also the brain chemistry part of this. There is dopamine that we get from this busy feeling, completion feeling, being needed, being in the mix. So there's so many reasons of why we find ourselves saying yes. And I would encourage you, if you're listening to this, to think about what drives you to be overcommitted, being deeply honest with yourself. Is it this desire for validation? Is it eternal optimism? Is it fear of rejection and failure? Is it comparison? Is it the dopamine hit? Is it actually that you're saying yes to things that you really don't know quite what they entail? You don't know what the scope is and whether you have said yes to something and you thought it was a small ask and it was a massive ask. I've just taken something on, actually, a new commitment, and I took ages to think about it because I wanted to be sure that I understood the commitment, because I tend to think it will be fine. I tend to think I can fit this in, and I wanted to be sure that I could. And I do think, you find a way to fit things in if they matter, but I don't want to do that at the expense of me actually coping and living life well. And when we are overcommitted, the downside is that when this is like an ongoing state of being, we are going to increase our stress to a point where stress is not helpful. Now, stress in and of itself, by the way, is not a bad thing. We could talk about stress another time in more detail. Stress, we need stress. If we don't have a feeling of a stressor, we do not get things done. So deadlines are important. The need to get things completed. If I saw a lion in my back garden, I would run. That's a stress that gets me out of danger. Like, we need stress. But what we don't need is high levels of stress that never let up. For some of you listening, you might begin to become anxious, and that anxiety means that then it affects your sleep or your ability to think clearly. I know for me, overcommitment means that I just don't know where to start. And I can feel the pattern in me of what happens when I'm in this place is I actually let myself remain massively overstimulated. So what I find myself doing is, as I've said already, jerking from one thing to another and not getting anything complete. And then what I find I do is I have incessant podcasts on or noise or things in the background that mean I don't allow my brain to come down from that place. And I know when I'm in that place that I really need a break. When that starts to happen, that is a clear sign for me that my body thinks it's doing something really good for itself, and actually it is not at all. And just lately I've been really fighting this and making myself go out for a walk, even when I don't have the time for a walk, and stepping away. But I am definitely in that sort of, almost think of it like a pinball machine. That's exactly how I feel at the moment. Ping, 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 ping. And I don't know how to even cope with the silence or even to begin to make a plan. And if you are feeling seen and heard by my example, there are things we can do. Yes, busy seasons come, but how do we get past this? So the next thing to think about and recognise is that saying yes to everything means that you end up not giving your best to anything that really matters. And none of us want that. And I would love you to think about, off the back of this podcast, what are you actually sacrificing by being overcommitted? And be honest with yourself and ask yourself that question. What is it you're sacrificing? Are you sacrificing peace of mind? Are you sacrificing being present for your family? Are you sacrificing a peace of mind that stops you from constantly living for what other people think of you? What are you sacrificing? And I think we have to then think about, what are we going to do different? How do we live differently? And I think there's a few things that we can do to help us to get our overcommitment in check. Again, it's season by season, it's life stage by life stage. But I think, first of all, we need to think about what our values are again. And again, when I work with people deeply, we always come back to what are your values and priorities? And you cannot have an unending list of values and priorities. There's a brilliant example from Warren Buffett. I've talked about this before, I'm sure I have, but it's so powerful. He was asked about one of his key sort of tips for success in his life. And he said that you should make a list of all the things that matter to you and make that list at least 25 things long. Write down all the things that are important to you. And then he said, from that, take the top 5 things that matter the most and decide what they are. So for me, that might be faith, family, friendship, my work, and probably something in there is around fairness. Those are probably some of the key themes for me. And everything else, all those other 20 things that you said were really important, but they were not quite top 5, his advice is to ruthlessly ignore them. And if they do not fit into those top priorities or top goals or top strands of your life, those should be ruthlessly ignored. Because the thing is, we are not distracted by things that are not a priority for us. So I'm not distracted by stuff that does not sort of fit into the medium category of my life. I'm not even going to give examples because I don't want it to sound like I'm judging anyone who has different priorities to me. But those things do not distract me. The things that distract me from my best are the things that are really good. And I think they're really good. And they are the thing where you have to see as a bit of a warning. Whether those are opportunities at work, are they really the best opportunities? Where do we have the courage to say no to something, thinking something even better will come along before too long? And I think that if we've got this system in place, it can help us prioritize better and have the confidence to say, actually, this is not enough of a priority for me and actually isn't getting me closer to the goals that I have set for my life. I think that's a really important thing. But if you don't know what those things are, you can't use that framework. I also think we have to learn to say no without feeling a sense of guilt. Someone has the right to ask you to do something. You also have the right to say you can't. I don't think the answer to a full life, however, is being incredibly boundaried and inflexible. We are meant to stretch out of shape sometimes. We are meant to be there in those moments that mean that actually our life comes out of balance. There are times and seasons for commitments to stretch us. I've got a friend who's dealing with a difficult diagnosis. I am not going to say, oh, no, I haven't got time to be there for you because I have to make sure I fit everything into the day that I would like to. That is not the right decision. But there are other times where we can just say, actually, this is not for me right now and I can't do this, but I can do this. Sometimes it doesn't have to be a no with nothing else. It could be this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. But I think learning to say no without qualifying it or a sense of guilt is really, really important and involves a bit of a mindset shift for us. And I think if you can have a clear decision-making framework, this will really help. So here's something for you to think about. First of all, does this align with my purpose? Does it feel like this is another thing that is really core to my purpose? That if it does, and that's a first tick. Does it move me towards a long-term vision I have for my life? Again, if it does, that nudges it closer to being a yes. And then finally, do I actually have the capacity for this? You have to ask yourself with every new commitment, if I am saying yes to this, what am I going to say no to? Most of us are not sitting around with latent free time. If you are, fantastic. There are loads of opportunities out there for you to fill it with. Most of you listening to this will not be feeling like that. So something has to give. You are not Hermione Granger in Harry Potter where she manages to time turn. I would love that gift. If you haven't read it, there's a bit in Harry Potter where Hermione is so desperate to do everything that she's got this time turner, which means that she can be in 2 places at once. And actually, it doesn't work out well for her. It's really stressful. But we haven't got that capacity. So if you take something on, it will be adding to what you've got in you. However you try to kid yourself, something has to make room for that. So what is it that you are going to shift in order to be able to do it? And it's really important for us to not see overcommitment as some sort of badge of honour. You know, it's so important to me that I do not play into this narrative of I'm a busy person or I'm overcommitted. I've got to own my life choices. I'm very happy to say things feel full. I'm very happy to say life can feel all the things I've said today, but I do not want it to be like an overflow of therefore this makes me important or of a badge of honour about my life, because that is a narrative that if we play into it just grows and grows and grows in our communities and in the relationships we've got. I just want to give you a couple of other little things to think about just to finish us off. The first thing is to say we've got to learn to embrace the joy of missing out. So rather than the fear of missing out, FOMO, we've got to think about some JOMO, you know, learning to say, I am choosing not to do this. I am choosing to miss out. I'm choosing to spend my time differently. And by missing out on that, I'm experiencing this. I think we need to also protect time. So when you have got certain things to do, put those things into your diary, you know, the really deeply important things, and lock off time for that and say, this is not to be touched. I think that's really, really important. I think the other thing I'd say to you is when you're feeling overcommitted, maybe talk to somebody or get everything down on paper. One of the best things I do when I get like this is to stop and see what there really is and make a plan for when things are going to happen. And I feel better by just doing that. I think one of the things that Oliver Burkeman talks about when this feeling of being really, really busy and overcommitted is to learn to do single purpose things and embrace single purpose technology, like trying not to constantly have everything multitasking. I've got two things in my life that are single use, which have been really good for me. One is my Kindle. So when I'm reading a book, that's all it does. It doesn't allow me to do other things at the same time. And I also have a Remarkable, which is an electronic notepad, which does not do anything other than take notes. I don't want to use an iPad because that pulls me into overstimulated, overcommitted, can't see what to do next, and I am desperately poor at single focus. So if you're anything like me, having those things is really, really useful. And I think I just want to leave it and realise that actually, you know, there will always be too much for us to do. There will be a sense of there's more here than I really have capacity for, and not everything I've got to do is going to make me happy. Not everything I do is going to be great for me. But those of us who are trying to live purposeful lives, those of us who want our lives to be full in every sense of the word, we will be doing things that cause us to feel overcommitted and cause us to feel like this actually is uncomfortable or not what I would be choosing with my time. But it may well be enlarging us. It may well be enlarging our life, making it better and fuller for the long run. There are certain things that it's right to say yes to that could push us into uncomfortable places, but they enlarge our life and actually give a lot back. So it's a fine line, it's a balance. And as you're listening to this today, and if you're feeling like Sisyphus pushing that boulder up the hill, there are some things you can do, and I'd encourage you to look at what's going on, what the patterns are, why you're doing it. And then, as I always say, think about what is one small shift you can make. What's one thing you can do this month that gets you a little bit of balance back into the way your life looks? What's one shift you can make? We can't completely throw everything out. Most of us aren't in the position to do that. But we can make shifts that over time actually really do add up and make our life feel like we can cope with our commitments and we can manage the things that we have in front of us, and we make sure we're doing those things that really should be us. Thanks for listening.